How that unfolds, because we started out, yeah, like you say, as a collective, shared everything in common. We had limited housing, so any given household would have at least 30 people living there. You had a constant flow of new people coming in to be integrated and so forth, which was fine when we were in our 20s. But then when we started having kids, it got a little more difficult to, you know, keep track of your kids and so forth. But, you know, we were weathering that. But in the early 1980s, there was an economic downturn. Ronald Reagan came in, ripped the solar panels off the White House, and immediately went to war against poor people, and the people that really paid the price were Indians all over the world, leftist-leaning groups throughout South and Central America, Indians living on reservations, and hippie communes. We all paid a steep price, and the economy got so bad around here that our construction crews didn't feel like we could compete for the few jobs that were available, and we weren't able to really support ourselves. Our population had gotten too big, and we had so many people that we were taking care of that we bit off more than we could chew, and so there was a break. Certain things were breaking down from that. And we were also getting older, and people are starting to think, you know what, my number one responsibility is to my family, my kids. I'm going to have to do what I have to do, which is go back to Texas or California and get a job and take care of my family. And so a whole bunch of people left. So everybody who was left here was also left facing a big land mortgage on additional land that we had bought and so forth. And it was teetering a little bit. It looked like, geez, we could lose it all. And there were still, 300 people or so here. So they started meeting. I wasn't here. I was in one of the satellite communities in Washington, D.C. They had from 1978 to the period of the changeover around 84. We didn't even know this was going on. We were up there, we were still collective and so forth. But at any rate, gradually we caught on and realized that there was no longer a guarantee, as far as Plenty was concerned, for our volunteers, that our volunteers could just work for free. Everybody was going to have to do something to support themselves or have some way of getting support. So that whinnied down the population even further here. So the only people that could stay were people that had some way of supporting themselves. We had a few businesses that kept going, the book company being one of them. But like I say, I was in Washington, D.C., and I was still doing Plenty from there. It didn't really matter where I was as far as Plenty, but we also had a Plenty office here. And I ended up going out to California with my family because I didn't have a place to come back to here. But I kept doing Plenty from there, in touch with the office here and so forth, and Plenty kept going. Plenty didn't need, but the thing that had energized the projects in the Bronx and Guatemala was that we had ready-made, skilled volunteers that we knew and trusted, that we could go, hey, could you go up to the South Bronx? They need another EMT. Or could you go down to Guatemala? We need a nurse, or we need a farmer down in Guatemala. And we could recruit out of our community, and our overhead was like under 5%, and we were really able to do a lot of big projects that way. So okay, now everybody we hire has to either be a volunteer And also, we're not going to have them live on the farm for 2 years to get to know them, which had been one of the rules. So we're going to have to assume some other people's goodwill. And one of the first volunteer groups that we had after that, 1987, I got a letter from a group of MBA students at the Wharton School of Business in Philadelphia. We want to work on a plenty project after we graduate, before we go to Wall Street and become bankers, which I thought was, in 1987, in the middle of the Reagan years, when MBAs had a reputation of being, get rich quick and millionaire before you're 30, and here's 8 MBA students from the top business school in the country that want to do plenty projects. So I actually went out to see them in Philadelphia. I grew up in Philadelphia, so I go back there from time to time. And I went out and met with them, and I looked in their eyes, and I saw us, 20 years previous, except that they were coming out of, most of them had lived internationally, spoke 2 or 3 languages. These kids were really bright, and they were really idealistic and really wanted to help, except the project that I had in mind was going to cost $15,000 just for the parts, because we were going to build a soy dairy on the island of Dominica for the Carib Indians. And we didn't have any money to pay them to get there, so they were on their own. I said, here's the deal. They didn't blink, and they went right to work, and within a month had raised $15,000 from 2 donations from graduates of the Wharton School of Business who liked the idea of them going out and doing a project like that. And they went down and did a great job, did a really good project, and so we started getting, then I had volunteers from MIT, Stanford University. All of a sudden we're getting all these next generation young people, who had nothing to do with the farm, had never been hippies, but who shared the vision and the ideal. And I have never had a problem with one of them, and I've had dozens and dozens of just graduate students. And since then we've had volunteers from all walks of life, from lots of different countries. And so there's that thing that binds us, and people respond to opportunities if they see them. And so that's what we live on in terms of our volunteers, and all of our people that are like our director of our project down in the Gulf, the post-Katrina rebuilding of New Orleans. Was a hippie that grew up in Pennsylvania, had never been here before, and a good friend of his runs our project in Belize. Another guy that grew up in the hippie scene in Pennsylvania, but was not a farm guy. So at this point, it's, the farm, and it has been integrated into the rest of the world and vice versa. I mean, I don't see a boundary between us anymore. And I look at our young people that got raised here, and their friends and their friends, and I feel like it's really spread far and wide, and is really very powerful, and